Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber Audio Magazine. Each edition brings you sharp insights and fresh perspectives from the world of cybersecurity, straight to your ears. For more resources and content, visit baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me. Let's dive in. The phrase, "don't paste sensitive thing into cool bot," has become the unofficial anthem of workplace AI policy. You've probably seen it in memos, on slides, or even printed on posters hanging in break rooms. It sounds sharp, easy to remember, and authoritative, like the kind of rule no one could misunderstand. But the reality is very different. Behind its catchy rhythm, the phrase says almost nothing at all. What counts as sensitive? Which tools qualify as cool bots? And why does the entire burden of judgment fall on the employee who may have minutes to finish a task and no clarity about what is safe? It's a slogan that gives the illusion of control while delivering very little in practice. Policies built on slogans often backfire. Instead of guiding behavior, they create hesitation, inconsistency, and a flood of risky workarounds. An engineer might decide that a redacted code snippet is harmless, while a project manager avoids GenAI entirely, even for tasks with no risk at all. Marketing teams find ways around the rule, opening personal accounts or experimenting with unvetted browser extensions just to keep pace. Far from locking data down, the "don't paste" mantra drives it into shadow spaces where organizations lose visibility and oversight. What feels like a safe, simple policy ends up being the root cause of the very risks it was meant to prevent. This episode is about moving beyond the Mad Libs version of AI governance. Over the next several sections, we'll take apart the myth of the "don't paste" rule, show why it fails, and replace it with something that actually works. We'll explore how to define sensitive thing with real clarity, how to distinguish CoolBot with a usable risk catalog, and how to build guardrails that let employees move quickly without gambling with safety. The journey here is not about slogans, it's about systems. It's about replacing fear with structure, ambiguity with precision, and frustration with trust. By the end, you'll see why the future of Gen A in the workplace depends on more than warnings. It depends on frameworks that people can actually use. The slogan, "don't paste sensitive thing into cool bot," fails because it is built on vagueness. No one in a company has the same definition of sensitive. To an engineer, it might mean tokens, keys, and source code. To a compliance officer, it means personally identifiable information. To a marketer, it could mean unreleased campaign material. Without shared language, employees are left to guess, and every guess opens the door to inconsistency. One worker pastes anonymized text into a chatbot believing it is safe, while another avoids AI entirely out of fear of breaking the rules. The policy becomes less about protection and more about hesitation, slowing down the very workflows it claims to safeguard. Worse still, the ambiguity doesn't eliminate risky behavior, it simply pushes it out of sight. Employees under pressure find ways around restrictions, often by turning to personal accounts, side apps, or plugins downloaded from the internet. This is the birth of shadow AI, an ecosystem of tools and channels that exist outside corporate oversight. Instead of reducing risk, the policy multiplies it, because leaders cannot protect what they cannot see. Sensitive fragments of data leak into consumer-grade platforms where they may be logged, retained, or used to train models. When those fragments resurface later, there is no audit trail, no incident response plan, and no accountability. Another core weakness is how the rule flattens all AI platforms into one bucket. A consumer chatbot with public data retention policies is treated the same as an enterprise SaaS model with contractual safeguards or a self-hosted system behind the company firewall. That lack of distinction prevents rational decision-making. In reality, the risk profiles are dramatically different, but the policy erases those differences with a one-size-fits-all warning. As a result, employees never learn how to evaluate tools on their merits, and leaders fail to build a framework that evolves with technology. Fear replaces precision, leaving opportunity and security equally ignored. Finally, the slogan places the burden of risk management entirely on the individual user. It assumes the worker must police their own behavior, while leadership avoids implementing system-level safeguards like redaction tools, DLP scanning, or AI gateways that could prevent most mistakes automatically. The effect is not empowerment, but blame. If something goes wrong, it is the employee's fault for not interpreting the policy correctly. Over time, this creates resentment and disengagement. Instead of trusting leadership to provide workable tools, staff either avoid AI altogether or embrace it recklessly in unsanctioned ways. In both cases, the organization loses. A hollow slogan may look like governance, but it operates as a trap catching employees in its vagueness while leaving the system exposed. But classification is more than just a four-box chart. Context matters too, and derived data can be as dangerous as the originals. Summaries of leadership meetings, embeddings of financial results, or test datasets created from production systems may look harmless at first glance. Yet these fragments often contain clues that a skilled attacker could piece together. A mature policy acknowledges the subtlety and treats contextual sensitivity as part of the equation. It reminds employees that even when something isn't raw data, it can still be radioactive. By validating this instinct with real rules, leadership builds credibility, showing staff they understand the risks people see on the ground. The next step is mapping actions to tiers. Employees need more than labels. They need a clear set of do's and don'ts. Tier 1 data should never leave approved enterprise environments, full stop. Tier 2 might allow transformation within vetted SaaS platforms that meet contractual controls. Tier 3 could be used for synthesis or summarization with lower risk providers. Tier 4, being public, may flow wherever needed. This traffic light model turns a wall of no into structured lanes of green, yellow, and red. It empowers staff to move quickly without gambling on compliance. By translating theory into concrete permissions, the policy does what the slogan never could. It makes safe choices faster than unsafe ones. There is one category that deserves special treatment: code and credentials. Too many organizations bury these in vague phrasing, leaving room for mistakes. Yet these assets are among the most abused in GenAI scenarios. Source code can reveal vulnerabilities, API keys can unlock systems, and configuration files can expose an entire environment. These must be called out explicitly as Tier 1 assets, forbidden from any external AI tool unless wrapped in secure, tightly monitored environments. Developers should see the rule in bold. Credentials and code are never paste safe. That clarity doesn't just prevent accidents, it eliminates doubt. With explicit rules, employees don't waste time debating gray areas. They know instantly where the line is, and they can work confidently within it. That is the kind of precision a real policy provides, turning a vague warning into muscle memory. Defining cool bot is just as critical as defining sensitive thing, because not all AI tools carry the same risks. A consumer chatbot used through a free or personal account often retains prompts, may reuse them for training, and rarely provides visibility or logs. By contrast, an enterprise SaaS platform with contractual controls offers retention settings, audit trails, and clear data handling guarantees. Then there are self-hosted or on-premise models that run entirely behind corporate firewalls, offering maximum control but demanding high technical maturity to manage. Treating these categories as if they are all one cool bot erases the nuances that matter most for risk. A strong policy spells out these differences so employees know exactly which tools are appropriate for each data tier. Instead of being told simply, "Don't paste," they can see a practical mapping. Tier 1 data stays on-prem, Tier 2 data in enterprise SaaS, and Tier 3 or 4 may flow to lower-risk platforms. Yet, platform type alone doesn't capture the full picture because integrations and extensions change the game entirely. Plugins, connectors, and autonomous agents can transform a seemingly safe model into a dangerous one by granting it new access paths. For example, when a chatbot connects to calendars, CRMs, or GitHub repositories, the blast radius expands instantly. Data may leave the company in ways not visible to the user, or external content may flow back in unexpectedly. Treating a base model with no integrations as identical to one loaded with plugins ignores this very real shift in risk. Policies must explicitly identify and classify tools with active extensions as separate entities from their vanilla versions. Employees need clarity that a bot without plugins and a bot with plugins are not interchangeable. This distinction makes them think twice before enabling connectors, and it signals that integrations deserve the same scrutiny as the platforms themselves. Vendor posture adds another dimension to defining CoolBot. Workers need to understand whether a provider retains data, how long it is stored, and whether it is ever used for training. They also need clarity about persistent memory features, default retention policies, and whether audit logs are available for compliance. A provider that cannot demonstrate controls in these areas belongs in the high-risk bucket, while one with clear contractual guarantees and external certifications earns more trust. Too often, these details stay buried in procurement or legal reviews, invisible to employees. By pulling them into the open, leaders create transparency and trust. Staff don't just see a list of approved and banned tools, they see the reasons behind those decisions. That transparency makes them more willing to comply because they feel informed rather than dictated to. The policy thus becomes not just a restriction, but an educational tool that raises the organization's collective risk awareness. Finally, organizations must recognize that AI platforms are living systems, constantly shifting underfoot. Models receive updates, vendors change their terms of service, and default settings evolve without much notice. A chatbot that was safe to use in January may quietly become unsafe in March when persistent memory is switched on or retention defaults are extended. A real policy treats these changes as risk events, triggering reevaluation of the tool's place in the catalog. This process prevents employees from relying on outdated assumptions and ensures that safety guidance evolves with reality. The CoolBot catalog must therefore be dynamic, updated as models change, as plugins proliferate, and as vendors adjust their practices. By making change management part of the governance process, the organization sends a clear message. It is not relying on slogans frozen in time, but on systems that adapt alongside technology. That is how employees learn to trust both the policy and the leadership behind it. Moving from "don't paste" to something meaningful requires more than slogans. It requires guardrails and green paths that make safe behavior automatic. An effective policy doesn't just forbid risk, it shows employees what to do instead, and it makes those paths faster than the workarounds. That begins with an approved tool list, anchored by an AI gateway that routes traffic through vetted providers. Instead of telling staff "don't paste" into consumer bots, leadership can say, "Use this enterprise bot integrated into your workflow." For developers, it might mean an IDE plugin that automatically scrubs secrets before sending a query. For analysts, it could be a chat system pre-configured with retention controls. These defaults shift the burden from people to systems. Workers don't waste energy wondering what's allowed. They follow the green paths provided, and in doing so, they stay both productive and compliant. It's a move from prohibition to enablement, and it changes everything. Guardrails also need to operate before risky behavior happens. Pre-paced protections like redaction engines, secret scanning, and contextual banners intercept mistakes before they leave the enterprise. Imagine dropping a database connection string into a chat window only for the system to block it and alert you instantly. Or picture a banner above a chatbot that reads, "This tool is approved for Tier 3 data only." These are not abstract reminders buried in a PDF. They're real-time cues that nudge people in the right direction at the exact moment of risk. Over time, these cues reinforce habits. Workers don't just memorize rules, they absorb them through repetition. The feedback loop turns abstract policy into instinct, much like guardrails on a highway. Drivers still steer, but the rails keep them from driving off the cliff. In practice, this means fewer slip-ups, faster decision-making, and a workforce that internalizes the rules through experience rather than fear. Inflow controls provide another layer of protection once data is moving. Prompt shields can detect and strip out sensitive material before it's processed, while output filters catch prohibited or risky results before they reach the user. Role-based connectors limit what bots can access, ensuring that an AI approved for marketing content doesn't suddenly start pulling HR records or financial data. Ephemeral sessions prevent memory from becoming a liability, wiping clean once the task is finished. These controls don't slow work down, they speed it up by eliminating hesitation. Employees don't second-guess whether their actions are compliant because they know the system itself is enforcing the rules in real time. The guardrails carry the burden, not the worker. That shift doesn't just reduce risk, it builds confidence. Staff trust that leadership has put protections in place, and that trust encourages more legitimate, secure adoption of AI. Safety and productivity are finally aligned. No system is complete without assurance after the fact. Even with proactive controls, incidents happen, and organizations need the ability to learn and adapt. Logging every AI interaction provides a trail for investigations, while routing suspicious cases into review queues gives human oversight where it's needed most. Security teams armed with playbooks can respond quickly, turning potential crises into manageable events. Continuous red teaming, using both humans and adversarial AI, keeps the defenses sharp by probing for weaknesses. This cycle of monitoring, testing, and improvement makes governance a living process rather than a static rulebook. Employees can see that the system doesn't claim perfection but demonstrates resilience. When something slips through, leadership investigates, adapts, and tightens the net. That transparency builds long-term trust. Instead of viewing policy as a trap, staff come to see it as a framework designed to catch mistakes, protect them, and make the safe path the easiest one. A workable AI policy doesn't need to be a sprawling legal tome. It needs to be a one-page reference that employees can actually use. The starting point is scope and definitions. Scope clarifies exactly where the rules apply: internal business functions, customer-facing services, or external vendor tools. Definitions remove ambiguity. What counts as sensitive thing, what qualifies as coolbot, and how tiers of each are determined. Without this foundation, every other rule is left open to interpretation, and interpretation leads to inconsistency. A good one-pager makes it impossible to miss. Employees should be able to glance at a chart and immediately know whether the data they're holding is Tier 1 or Tier 3, and whether the tool in front of them is approved or banned. By anchoring the entire policy in these simple, shared definitions, leadership sets the stage for clarity that can survive the pressure of daily work. At the center of the template is a permissions grid, an easy-to-read matrix that matches data sensitivity with bot categories. Tier 1, the crown jewels, stays locked inside enterprise boundaries and never flows to external systems. Tier 2, such as source code or sensitive contracts, may be processed only through enterprise SaaS platforms with strong contractual safeguards. Tier 3, like internal memos or performance dashboards, can be summarized or enriched in approved platforms under limited conditions. Tier 4, consisting of public data, may be used almost anywhere. This grid transforms policy from a vague warning into a decision tool. Instead of "don't paste," the chart gives employees a traffic light system of red, yellow, and green. The simplicity accelerates adoption because no one wastes time guessing where the lines are. In one glance, the workforce can map their task to a rule, confident they are staying within safe boundaries. The one-pager also needs to address how tools are chosen and managed. Employees should know the process for adding a new AI service to the approved list, what criteria vendors must meet, and how retention and audit standards are enforced. Procurement teams need a visible checklist. Does the vendor use data for training? Are logs accessible? Can retention be disabled? Is the provider aligned with regulations such as GDPR or HIPAA? When these factors are summarized in plain language, staff understand the why behind approvals instead of seeing a mysterious yes or no. The template should also outline the organization's approach to logging and audit. Framed properly, this is not surveillance, but a safety net, a way to protect workers if something slips through. By presenting oversight as partnership, the policy builds trust instead of suspicion, encouraging people to stay within the guardrails rather than circumvent them. The final element of the one-page template is the exceptions path. No matter how carefully designed, every policy runs into edge cases. Without an explicit process, employees create their own workarounds, often exposing the organization to greater risk. A strong template builds in a fast, transparent mechanism for requesting exceptions. It might involve a short digital form, automatic logging, and rapid review by a designated team. Documented exceptions not only solve the immediate problem, they generate a feedback loop. If a particular rule requires repeated exceptions, it signals the need for adjustment. Over time, this process keeps the policy alive rather than frozen. Employees see that leadership is willing to listen and adapt, while leadership gains visibility into real-world needs. The one-pager becomes not just a set of rules, but a living framework. It demonstrates that safety and flexibility can coexist, and that compliance doesn't have to mean compromise. Slogans like "don't paste sensitive thing into cool bot" often create what can only be described as compliance theater. On the surface, the organization appears to be serious about governance because a rule exists. But in practice, the rule functions as little more than a poster or a slide, shifting responsibility entirely onto employees while leaving the system itself unchanged. Workers end up in a guessing game, constantly unsure if they are following the letter of the rule. The irony is that this kind of culture does not build safety, it undermines it. Fear and ambiguity do not inspire compliance. They drive avoidance, resistance, or risky shortcuts. What looks like order from the boardroom looks like confusion on the ground floor. The gap between appearance and reality becomes a breeding ground for shadow AI, resentment, and missteps. In this sense, slogans offer the illusion of security while quietly eroding trust. A real framework takes a very different approach. Instead of saying "don't," it says "do this instead." It starts from the assumption that employees want to do the right thing, and then gives them the clarity, tools, and defaults to make that easy. A strong GenAI policy provides specific guardrails that work in the background and green paths that accelerate legitimate use. Employees are not punished for mistakes, they are protected from making them in the first place. That shift changes everything. Workers no longer feel like they are being policed by leadership. They feel supported by systems that anticipate risk and reduce it automatically. This transformation moves governance out of binders and into everyday workflows. Policy stops being an obstacle and starts being an enabler, guiding people towards safe adoption with as little friction as possible. The effect is cultural as much as technical, a shift from fear to trust. Culture is the soil where policies either thrive or wither. Employees embrace rules when they see them modeled by leadership, reinforced by tools, and explained with transparency. Safe defaults become sticky habits when they are embedded in the flow of work. A red banner warning that a chatbot is only approved for Tier 3 data is far more effective than an hour-long lecture about classification. Quick, fair handling of exceptions tells staff that the system is designed to help them, not punish them. Over time, these signals compound into trust. People stop treating AI rules as hurdles and start treating them as part of how work gets done. This doesn't happen overnight. It grows through consistency. When leaders apply the same rules to themselves, when IT provides easy-to-use tools, and when security partners with employees instead of scolding them, culture shifts. Policy becomes more than a document. It becomes a way of operating. This cultural shift is what ultimately transforms AI policy from a poster into a playbook. Slogans can capture attention, but they cannot sustain behavior. A framework, however, embeds the rules into muscle memory, where compliance becomes instinctive. Employees don't need to remember the don't paste rule because their systems, their defaults, and their habits already keep them safe. They see that leadership is investing in clarity, not just fear, and that investment builds loyalty as well as resilience. Instead of fearing AI tools, employees feel empowered to use them responsibly, confident that the rails are in place. And when mistakes happen, they are not treated as failures. They are treated as opportunities to strengthen the system. That combination of trust, resilience, and continuous improvement is what makes AI governance sustainable. Posters fade, but playbooks endure. Culture ensures that safety is not just written down, but lived every day across the organization. The lesson is clear. Don't paste sensitive thing into cool bot was never enough, and it never will be. Slogans may look like governance, but they cannot carry the weight of trust, productivity, or compliance. What organizations need instead are frameworks that employees can live with and lean on. Data maps that define sensitivity with precision, risk catalogs that distinguish between tools, and guardrails that make safe behavior automatic. When these elements come together in a one-page template and in the daily workflow, they replace fear with clarity. Workers no longer guess at the rules or hide their actions in the shadows. They see a system designed not just to restrict them, but to support them. That is what builds confidence and accelerates legitimate adoption. The legacy of a real GenAI policy is cultural, not just technical. It is the difference between an organization that treats AI as a lurking danger and one that treats it as a trusted partner. By moving from poster to playbook, from slogans to systems, leaders prove that safety and speed can coexist. They show employees that the safest way is also the easiest way, and in doing so, they make responsible AI use part of the organization's DNA. In time, the old warnings fade, replaced by muscle memory and instinct. What remains is a workplace where people and machines work together productively, without fear, because the rails are built in. That is the future of AI governance, not Mad Libs, but muscle memory. Thanks for listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Audio Newsletter. Stay sharp, stay secure, and explore more resources at baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me.